Hey Tom, how's it going?
Well, thank you. Hope you guys are doing well.
Yeah, doing good today. Doing good today. I'll start kind of recording who we have. Let me see. Hey Earl, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Hey Ryan, how are you today?
Doing good.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. We got a different wind blowing, so hopefully some of that coastal stuff is getting resolved for folks too.
Yep, trying to head it in the opposite way.
That's right. We need like a strong wind from the west, blow everything out of the basin.
Yes. A cool front would be nice too.
Might be asking for too much though. It's almost June. Hey Chris, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Hey Aaron, thank you for being here. Hey Renee, doing good today? Hey Fred, y'all holding up okay?
Yeah, Miss Rachel, about as well as can be expected, you know. I
Yeah.
only got about 50 claw marks on my back, but otherwise everything's pretty good.
I mean, I'm glad it's not more, but it's week's been rough. It's been a rough week.
Yep.
Hey Deepmar, thanks for joining us today. And good afternoon, Amy. Thank you for joining.
I had to kind of, okay, yeah, I'm here.
You good? You doing okay today?
I'm green, but I'm here.
All right, gotcha. Hey, Honora, welcome. Hey, Jenna.
Hi.
Doing okay today?
Yeah, I just had to paddle across the pond to get to work.
I was
Still
about to
flooded
ask if
in.
you're still flooded in. Y'all
I'm
still good
still
on
flooded
supplies?
Oh, I'm fine. My car's on the other side. I got it over, thank goodness. But yeah, the house is
Cool.
high and dry. My quarter-mile driveway, about half of it's under 2 feet of water. So I have a paddle.
That's in Ascension?
Yeah, I'm in Prairieville. The
Prairieville.
Bluff Swamp
Oh, yeah.
overflow. I'm on the high side of the bluff, but my property connects under the interstate. So hopefully it's not as bad as 2016. I was trapped for a month. So
Oh my
far,
gosh.
a week.
And where are you, Honora, that you were trapped for a month?
I'm in Ascension, in Prairieville, on the high side of the interstate, opposite Bluff Swamp, and my property connects to Bluff Swamp through the interstate. So when Bluff Swamp fills up, it backs up into my property and doesn't drain until they drain Bluff Swamp, which can take a month once it fills up.
Wow.
I didn't flood in '83. I bought my property in '83. It didn't flood then, but the only times it's gone over the driveway has been 2016 and this year. It came close when Allison hit, but didn't quite go over the driveway.
Wow.
Yeah.
But my house is actually mapped into the special flood hazard area, which it's not, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
I'm from California, and I remember when my wife and I were looking to buy a house for the first time. We were in Berkeley, and there was a house, the first time we put a bid on a house. And we were talking with our broker and looking at a plat map of our house and the surrounding properties. And I asked our broker, I said, so what is that jagged black line that runs from the southwest through the property to the northeast and then off the map? And she said, oh, that's the Alquist Priolo Special Studies Zone designation. And I said, well, would you translate that for me? And she said, well, it's popularly known as the San Andreas Fault. And I said, are you telling me that the San Andreas Fault runs underneath this property? And she said, yeah, that's right. So we didn't put a bid on that.
Wow.
Three weeks later, the Loma Prieta earthquake hit in 1989 near Santa Cruz. And so one of the wisest choices you ever make is the one you don't, as I learned.
I appreciate that wisdom, John. Yeah, that's certainly true in many cases. Wow, what an experience. Let me see, we've got our chair and our vice chair here now, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank y'all so much for being here with us today. We know that people have been a lot busier than usual. There was significant flooding across not just our region, but a lot of Louisiana. So we know that folks are dealing with things at work. Some people are dealing with things personally as well. And so we just really appreciate y'all being here today. I know in light of those events too, it can also be a lot to ask to see your faces. If you are screen timed out and do not want to share your camera, that is fine. But if you're feeling up to today, we would love to see everybody's faces. We're hoping our next meeting is going to be in person. I've been talking with Bridget a little bit about that to see if we can have our first in-person meeting in Tangipahoa. So just know that we're going to be transitioning to that and having a hybrid option as well. So folks who, where it works better for them, they can still tune in virtually, because we also know that sometimes traveling can be difficult for folks. So let's see, we'll go ahead and get started here. Let me see, I'll make this little window smaller so I can see everything on my screen. There we go. Okay, so my name is Rachel Sanderson. I'm the Region 7 Watershed Coordinator. I work at Capital Region Planning Commission, and I'm definitely not the only person who contributes to this work. We are one of many folks who are working on this, or I am one of many folks who are working on this. Kim Marisek put in some time for the development of what we're going through today. Same with Jamie Stutz, who's our Executive Director at CRPC, Evelyn Campbell with OCD, Nicolette Jones at OCD, who are both helping out today with logistics as well as behind the scenes things. And then Victoria Nguyen, who is our Louisiana Watershed Initiative intern with us for the summer. And also she has been helping Dr. Dowsett with his work at LSU. So there are folks who are not listed here, but there are many, many people who we have to thank for just all of the incredible work that's been going on across the region. Our agenda for today, we're in the introductions and meeting logistics portion. We do ask that you put your name and affiliation in the chat pod for us. If you don't technically have an affiliation, feel free to just say where you're calling in from today. We would love to also hear that. We're going to go over a past meetings recap, reminders and updates, because we know that for some people, this might be the first conversation that they're having with us, right? So we want to make sure that we're catching everybody up to speed and reminding people of where we've come from. We're going to then go into a pretty robust discussion on the feedback for the provisional governance recommendation, which reminds me that I would like to drop this in the chat pod for everybody to be able to access. We had a document that was created this morning that has all of the feedback that we have received in an easier way for people to analyze, for them to think about how often people had brought it up or mentioned. That's going to be for the discussion today. So there was no need to review it ahead of time. Nobody missed anything. We sent it this morning with the understanding that we would be using it as a worksheet for today's meeting. And then you can also send it to me at a later date with any of your comments. And then we're going to go through one item for an update with our bylaws, and then also discuss the open steering committee position that we had because of Chuck's departure with the EQ. We have our public comment period and then close out as always. So just as a reminder, this is a meeting that's observable to the public. There's opportunity for public comments. Although any of our folks who are not steering committee members, we encourage you to put your comments and feedback in the chat pod at any moment in time. We are recording this meeting. We always post all of these online, all the meeting recordings, all the meeting minutes, things of that nature online, unless there's technical difficulties. I know in the past that we've had some technical issues and we couldn't actually post the recording. We're about to do roll call. And just a reminder that comments made in the chat pod are technically written public comments. So we do actually include those in the meeting minutes, and we actually review those as we do this work. We have some shared agreements with this group. So what shared agreements are ways for engagement. So how we want to interact with one another. So we aspire to be brief and meaningful when voicing our opinions, just so we can give space to other people, seek common ground and understanding, consider what serves the benefit of the entire region. And then when we're presenting a challenge, offer a solution. And if you're not sure what the solution is, you can say that, and maybe we can brainstorm as a group to be able to get through that. The document that I mentioned, this is the feedback that we received on the provisional governance recommendation for Region 7 specifically. You can find that link in the chat pod. And we also have it posted on our website at crpcla.org. If you go to the Region 7 Watershed tab and click on upcoming events and select the date for today, you'll see that worksheet there as well. And then just a reminder that we do have a concept called the Idea Marina that we implement here. So if there's a discussion that comes up that's not related to the goals of the meeting, we put it in the Idea Marina to revisit at a later date. All right, and with that, we are going to get into our introductions, so really roll call. So we're going to see who we've got from all of our representatives on the line. I think I got some folks written down, but do we have Mike Enlow and or Ron with Ascension Parish today? No, they're managing a lot of backwater flooding, so can only imagine how busy they are. Okay, I think I saw Fred and Tom. Can y'all just say hello so we can confirm that you're here?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred.
I'm here.
Hey, Tom. Hey, Tom, I hope you're doing okay.
Oh, yeah, high and dry. Got no complaints.
Good, good. James Stewart or Joni Stone with East Feliciana. Okay, not seeing them. John Clark with Iberville. I think I saw you sneak in. You're busy too.
Good afternoon, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hey, John, you doing okay?
We're doing good. We're hanging in there.
Good, good, good. Steve Kistler and or Mark Harrell with Livingston. I think I saw you come on the line, Steve.
Yep, Steve Kistler's here.
Hey, Steve. Thank you for being here. Earl, you said hello earlier, but can you say it again just to make it official?
Hello.
Hello. Thanks, Earl. Let me see. Do we have Major Coleman on the line with St. Helena or Jeremy Williams?
Major Coleman is here. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Major. I'm going to rename your phone number just so that we have that in here. Whoops. You doing okay?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. How about yourself?
Good. Hey, it's not raining anymore and it's not super hot yet, so there's not a lot to complain about.
Good deal.
Yeah. Ryan Donahue and or Ryan LaRousse. I think I saw Ryan LaRousse on the line.
Yep, Ron LaRousse here.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for being here today. Renee Pastorek with St. John.
Yep, I'm here.
Thanks for being here, Renee. Our chair, Ross Leiner with St. Tammany.
Yep.
Hey, Ross. Bridget Bailey, our vice chair now with San Jaboa.
I'm here.
Hey, Bridget. Bobby Joe Breland and or Alex Sumrall with Washington Parish.
Hey,
Good
Rachel.
afternoon, Bobby J. here.
Great. All right, I heard both of y'all. Welcome. Gary Migo or Emily Cobb with West Feliciana. I think I saw Gary earlier. He might have said hello.
Yeah, this is Gary. I'm here.
Hey, Gary.
Hey.
All right. And then Dietmar, I know you're on the line. Do we have Larry too? Can you say hello to make it official?
I am here, and Jenna Lynn representing Larry.
Oh, perfect. Welcome, Jenna.
Thank you.
And then Karen Vito, I see you with this fabulous new hairstyle. I love this, by the way.
Hello, everyone. I'm here.
Welcome. And then Ronnie, I know you said you got to sign off at about 2:30 today.
Right.
Well, glad to have you while we can.
Is Kim Coates with us?
Let me see.
I guess not. Okay.
Not here. Okay. All right. Well, that does it for roll call. We are good to go. What's up with this presentation view here? So we're going to actually restart this one more time. There we go. All right. That's better. Perfect. All right. So we're going to get started. I wanted to go and just talk a little bit about the events of last week and just some stuff that I've been thinking on, and I want to hear from some folks in the group. So, you know, I know that I don't talk about this often, but I just wanted to let y'all know my background because I'm about to present what's more technical information. I just want y'all to know that like that's not a weird thing for me. I'm not a person who's unfamiliar with that information or data trying to present it again. So I used to be an on-air meteorologist. I have an undergraduate degree in professional meteorology. I have a graduate degree in coastal geomorphology and did a lot of work for my thesis, as well as collecting sediment samples on every sandy shoreline across Southeast Louisiana. I'm also a trained facilitator, a team member of multiple award-winning planning processes. I'm a published author on issues of rainfall and was a former hydrometeorologist intern at the National Weather Service River Forecast Center in Slidell. And I'm also the only certified climate change professional in the state of Louisiana. So just want to put that out there because I'm going to present some technical information and I don't want y'all to think that I'm just trying to present information that I don't know about. And then I also more importantly want to say that with all of this, that still doesn't equate to generational knowledge of Louisiana, right? My family has experienced different flood challenges along the Missouri River in the Kansas City area for a long time. But I also recognize and understand that there are a lot of things that I don't understand because I haven't had that generational knowledge. And I didn't hear the stories from my father about how flooding happened or my grandparents. So just really want to recognize and honor that knowledge as well. So last week, as we all know, we had a pretty significant flood event across really, I mean, South Louisiana, not just within our region. You'll see this in this radar loop here, that system, same system that caused flooding in Lake Charles, caused flooding in Lafayette, caused flooding in Baton Rouge, and everywhere in between. We are still experiencing impacts from backwater flooding in various places across the southern portion of the state. And then also because of the setup of the system, we saw coastal flooding as well. So I'll get to that in just a minute. We're not strangers to the rainfall totals. NOAA has had conversations about these little white spots on the map. Those are supposed to be 10 inches or more. They've talked about increasing that scale because we know that some places definitely got 15 plus inches last week as well. So really what happened last week, and I'm trying to connect the rainfall flooding that had occurred from a system back to the flooding that we also experienced from a coastal perspective. There's a lot of high water in the Pontchartrain Basin and Lake Maurepas, places surrounding that area. So for the beginning part of the week, we have what we call deep moisture convergence. So if you imagine, we usually have like a kiddie pool, but because of the meteorological setup and the dynamics last week, we essentially took our kiddie pool and made it like a 6-foot deep end pool. So we had access to a lot more moisture. We also had instability. So we had really good conditions to be able to create slow moving storms that had the potential to create a lot of rain. So that's what we saw. And then also because of the we call this the upper air pattern, there are different levels within the atmosphere. So you can think about the top part of that atmosphere being kind of like the big gear that moves the things below it. And then there's smaller gears that are within those weather patterns that create the conditions that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So that bigger gear pattern is this high and low. And this is meteorologist Chris Franklin at WWL, where I used to work at actually. And so I wanted to pull this graphic, wanted to make sure I'm getting him full credit too, because I think that it shows at least how you can have this funnel that's created. So with a high pressure, what you see is that goes clockwise. So the same direction that a clock goes, that's the direction that the wind flows. With a low pressure, it's the opposite. It's the counterclockwise, so the opposite way that a clock goes. And really, we were experiencing these significantly strong southeasterly winds because we were kind of caught in between those two, if that makes sense. So the same system and same dynamic at this upper air pattern that was set up that led to the slow moving storms that we saw in the beginning of the week that led to rainfall related flooding. Then in the middle part of the week led to coastal flooding because the winds were pushing water into those basins. Then at the latter part of the week led to riverine flooding and backwater flooding because all of the water was draining somewhere. So I just want to say all of that to say that this is an extremely interconnected system. So it's not just talking about how we're related via watersheds. I think we know that, but also that we are actually connected from air to earth. So it's the same systems that we're experiencing from a meteorological perspective that are inducing what we're experiencing from a hydrologic perspective on the ground. And so Bridget and Ross, I want to toss it to y'all if you want to say thank you before we get into this little icebreaker.
I want to say thanks everyone for tuning in today. I know we've got 30 or so people online, and I appreciate you guys serving me up to serve as the vice chair moving forward, since we lost Chuck here recently. So other than that, I'll turn it over to Ross.
Yep, agreed. Thanks, Bridget, and really enjoyed our hour-long conversation yesterday. So Bridget's going to be a great addition as vice chair to this group. So very excited to have her on, and just ready to get started for today. So thanks, Rachel. Great presentation, by the way.
Thanks. It brings me back to green screen times. So it was a joy. But I want to hear from folks. So if you're a steering committee member, feel free to come off mute. If you're a member of the public, please feel free to put your experience in the chat pods. But I'm just curious if you experienced, or are you currently experiencing, impacts from flooding in your parish or your community? Has that happened in the last week? If so, where are you at? How long are you experiencing that? We heard from Honora earlier before we got started that she has been flooded in for essentially since last week. So it's been a full week for her. Her house is high and dry, but she has to park her car on the other side and then paddle out to her car every day to be able to get to work. And so we just want to hear from folks what they're seeing. Kim Coates sent me this picture from Tangipahoa Parish yesterday. So this is the port, it's the entrance to the port. She says that the water got up to the rail car wheels. And Bridget, I'm sure you're familiar with this as well. I tried to go for a hike on Saturday on the North Shore in St. Tammany and ran into this flooding. That is a for sale sign. This is in the Lacombe area. We know that exit 1, so 55 and 51 is that Laplace area, was also closed. So there was a lot of water on the road. And then this particular photo is from Baton Rouge. So it was a later in the evening apartment complex rescue, from my understanding. So I'm just curious what people's experiences are, and we'll spend probably about 3 to 5 minutes. So feel free to put in the chat pod. If you're a steering committee member, feel free to come off mute.
This is
Hey,
Ron.
this is Bobby Jo in Washington.
It's Region 6, but in South Vacherie, our weir, backwater weir, has actually been closed for 2 months, reporting a level above 2.5 feet. It's just the water, and it's the same thing in Region 7 as well. The water is just not getting out. It's becoming a problem that the water is just not leaving anymore. And I mean, I don't know if that has to do with lake levels and that kind of stuff, but it's getting to be every year it seems it's taking more time and more time for the water to get out. And when you have 12, 13 inches on top of that, it's a problem.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. We had our conversation last week, and I know you said that y'all are essentially the bottom of the bucket, not the bottom of the bucket, but the bottom of many buckets. And so you have to manage a lot of people's water. It's interesting to hear your experience too, that it's been taking longer for the water to get out. And I know we had somebody else who was about to speak as well at the same time as Ryan. I didn't catch who it was, but please feel free.
Hey, this is Bobby Jo, Washington Parish. Thankfully, we did not have any flooding from last week's rain. Both of our rivers were at a good level where any rise did not back up from the creeks and the tributaries. like what happened in 16, 18, and 19 here. So we were pretty fortunate in our area.
I'm glad to hear that, Bobby Joe. I think based on what I was looking at, I think maybe the Feliciana, St. Helena, and then Washington might have been the only parishes in our region that didn't get flooding, but somebody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Hey, this is Earl. We were pretty lucky. We did have 5 structures that took on very minimum amounts of water back on the 17th during the rainfall. And with the coastal flooding, it's high and it's against all of our levees. I'm in the agreement that it's just not going down as fast as it seemed to in years past. So we're just holding tight right now.
Thanks, Earl. Definitely been thinking about y'all. It's kind of up in that area. It seems we got a couple of funnels. Really strong westerly wind. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
I'll piggyback on what Ryan and Earl was saying. Yeah, we might have taken a half dozen structures maybe this past month or this month with the rains and other flooding events. But yeah, it's just not moving like it used to. So I'll back that up.
Thanks, y'all, for this conversation. I feel like we could talk about this in particular all day and try to figure out what are some of the similar experiences we're having. And then also, I know we got a lot. We have less content than usual today, believe it or not, but we got to move on through that. So just thank
Rachel,
you all.
I want to say,
go ahead, Dietmar.
From the perspective of my little lot, I call it the Amite River Basin. That's my little lot. From the point of view of the Amite River Basin historically, because I'm very familiar with the history, because I've been involved with this for many years, this was a very unusual rain pattern that created unusually flooding, abnormal flooding, I call it disparity flooding. Why? The traditional big events, and Fred can back me up on this, they occur when the rain pattern, which is the traditional way, is in such a way that the rain falls in the upper basin, let's say, which is in Mississippi. And as that crest comes down, the Amite River and the Commit River, that is what brings the backwater effect in the urbanized area where the people live. And that gets exasperated when you also, in such a pattern, all of a sudden you have local rain at the time that the crest is passing through Baton Rouge, which is 24 hours, 30 hours after the rain in the upper basin. Those are the worst cases. That is the profile of the big flood in the basin. This particular one is completely abnormal in that sense. The bullseye was in the Manchac area. That is on the southern part of the basin. And so the Amite and the Commit were very low. And like the person that just talked on Washington Parish, of course, you know, there was no rain up there. So because the rivers were low, all of the rain the intensity of the rain was so great, 10 inches or so. In 83, there were 13 in Zachary that created the big problem at that time. So you can imagine the amount of rain that fell there. So really it's flash flooding, basically. The water cannot get out fast enough to take care of that amount of water coming down in such a short period of time. That is the reason why you see this phenomenon as it is right now. And so, and that kind of points in the we are right now, and I have not talked to, we contacted Fred about it. We have sent 2 surveying crews out, 2 contractors to measure the high water marks right now, because this is like the scene of a crime. You cannot wait a week or 2 and then send the detectives to investigate the crime. So these watermarks are very sensitive, And so we got surveyors going to be out in the field for another 3 or 4 days measuring all the high water marks. Why is that important, in my opinion? Is because it isolates the localized flooding from the traditional flooding. It measures a part of the problem down there that, again, it gets exasperated when you have a high emit and commit, especially emit. The emit is the commit comes into the emit a little bit further north. But so in that sense, it was an abnormal for the basin, for this basin, it was an abnormal event. That's all what I have to say.
Thanks, Dietmar. Appreciate that. I also want to acknowledge some comments in the chat pod. So in Nora, I had floodwater backing up close to my roadway for several weeks before it went under last Monday night. Knee deep since then. I was getting on average 2 inches of rain per day, then 11 inches Monday night. And Nora lives in Prairieville area. John Leo from East Baton Rouge Parish near the Perkins Road Commercial Development east of the Perkins Blue Bonnet intersection. Dawson Creek, to our immediate north-northwest, did not flood as I'm told it did in 2016. However, throughout a roughly 5 square mile area from Lee College on the west to TQ on the east, apologies if I mispronounced that, I witnessed actual flooding as well as some of its residential damage consequences, i.e. 3 to 4 foot high piles of carpeting, furniture, and other household goods piled on front lawns next to curbs in many neighborhoods. A low-lying multi-unit apartment building complex immediately south of I-10 on Segan Lane was submerged halfway or more up the doors and walls of ground floor apartments, and the parking lot with dozens of cars was flooded up to the windows or higher of all vehicles I could see. Several groups of people, almost all of them African American, were wading through wastewater with plastic bags over their heads or on their shoulders, trying to make it out of the parking lot. And then Lionel Johnson, Mayor Lionel Johnson, we have residential developments with sitting water of 3 to 4 feet, with some residents not able to get in or out of these developments. Thank you all again for sharing your experiences. I know that some of us we're still going through it, right? We're going to be for weeks to months because we got a lot of work to do with recovery. And I know this will certainly inform the way that we do the work moving forward. So we're going to move into updates section. We did have a municipal water ops or water opportunities workshop last week. We had about 22 people registered. The purpose of the workshop was to be able to get feedback for the benefit of the provisional governance recommendations. So you'll be seeing directly some of that feedback today. We had folks from Denham Springs, Madisonville, Slidell, Baker, Livingston, Covington, and St. Tammany. So about 8 people total. For the community water ops workshop, which took place the day after, we had 42 registered. 12 were able to make it from LaPlace, Baton Rouge, Prairieville, et cetera. Also wanted to provide you with an update on some of the work that we've mentioned over time. So the Georgetown Climate Center, Affordable Housing and Flood Risk Work, the second work group meeting is in June. We have some research from Georgetown Climate Center students who throughout their term, I think they were both graduate students, actually research strategies across southeastern United States, that's repetitive, southeastern states in the United States, to be able to see what strategies they're using that are at this intersection. So we should receive that document, and we're happy to share those people. We also are thinking about a hybrid deliverable of a visioning and strategy document because we realized that the conversation around affordable housing and flood risk, in particular for rural affordable housing, could use a little bit of a vision to it. So there'll be part visioning and part strategy document. For the resilience roadmap work with EPA, which we've heard about, excuse me, y'all, my allergies are terrible today, which we've heard from a couple of folks on this work. So that's Rich Fulford, Joyce Stubblefield with EPA, and then we also heard from Kevin Crosby, who's with Ouachita. They've been through that process before. We're working together on putting an advisory group, and we're anticipating the first meeting in late June, perhaps early July, depending on scheduling. We also are doing some work with some environmental finance centers. This, again, none of these are any cost to the region. It's additional capacity building support. So essentially, the work of these entities are being supported through other grant dollars, and they have chosen to partner with us to be able to implement on the work. So the idea here is the development and implementation of a regional workshop sometime later this year that informs also these aforementioned efforts, but to get people together in a space to really think about how far we've come So it's 5 years since 2016 floods. And we really want to think about where were we at then? What were the strategies that we would have liked to have implemented? And then maybe what happened and why, and what didn't happen and why? How can we really come together and strategize around that? A quick update on the transition team. They are actually tackling the relevant documents for transitioning one at a time. That was the most effective workflow as decided by that group. And so they're starting with the bylaws. And so in the near future, within the next couple of months, they're going to come to the steering committee with a request for feedback on the composition of the watershed governance body in the near future. So that's one example. There will be other things with the bylaws, but this seems like the most pressing item, if you will. So just stay tuned. We're going to have documents and things. We're just not there yet. We're doing research and making sure that we're thinking about best practices. Now I want to open up the floor to our steering committee members. If you have updates that you would like to share with the rest of the group, and then certainly anybody who's not a steering committee member, please put any of your updates if there are events or certain things that are happening that you would like for people to know about. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Also feel free, if you think of something afterwards, just send it to me in an email. I think almost everybody on this call should have my email. Can put it in the chat pod just in case, but feel free to send me an email with that update. Okay, make this bigger again since I don't need to write anything out. So just a reminder of where we've been to get everybody on the same page. We started this process, really our first meeting was a year ago. So happy 1 year to all of our regional steering committee members. It has been a year, but we have really, we've grown a lot. I think we've really found a way to create connection and to be able to talk about these challenges together. But our really first meaty discussion, I say meaty, was in August. We started defining the values, visions, and goals for this region. We then looked at the root causes of flooding and then opportunities to be able to address those. We talked about the regional boundaries. We then talked about what the region wants to fund and the functions of the work. In December, we presented a couple of different governance models to inform kind of how we wanted this work to go moving forward. In January, we had a discussion on the provisional governance recommendation, and we voted on that and adopted that document 12-2, with a 12-2 vote, I should say. In February, we focused on discussing the regional round 1 project selection process. In March, we heard about long-term funding opportunities, and we also discussed the round 1 project selection process, decided through consensus that we would leverage the state's process, and we made that official during our April meeting. And so the future work, just a reminder, we still have to do this round 1 project selection. For those of you who may not have received the email notice, there's a special meeting that's being held by the Council on Watershed Management. That's on the 27th at 9 a.m. There should be information on watershed.la.gov under get involved on the calendar. I think they have that meeting posted, but they're going to make some announcements with regards to funding for round 1, so stay tuned for that. The provisional governance recommendation has to be updated and voted on and approved by the steering committee by the end of June, so our next meeting. And then the transition team working group is really going to be working pretty hard to develop documents and then to also get feedback from the steering committee on those and incorporate that as we transition from the steering committee into the eventual coalition. So Ross, I'm going to toss it over to you for this slide.
Yep, thanks. As always, I like to pick one of these out before we start our meeting. And today I'm gonna go with E, creating a path for the state and its various jurisdictions and political subdivisions to coordinate at a statewide and watershed level to maximize flood risk reduction in coordination with the natural and beneficial functions of the watershed and its floodplains, and consistently manage floodplains using contextually appropriate best practices. I mean, based on what we've experienced this month in Rachel's presentation earlier, I think we all need to start working more together regionally for these projects and start, attacking the water together rather than that political boundary. So thank you all for being here, and turn it back to Rachel.
Thanks, Ross. And as a reminder, that executive order, the full version of it can also be found online. Jonathan, thank you, or John, in the chat pods that I testified at last week's Capital Area Groundwater Conservation Commission hearing. That is a mouthful, where the commission voted 9-7 to approve a $7.85 million 3-year plan. It says MM, but I don't know if that means just 1M or multi-million 3-year plan to install water meters on all industrial, public and private water purveyor and all other wells for the first time in its 50-year history. This outcome was in part a result of the commission's reaction to scathing 2019 legislative auditor's report. Yeah, this is that is significant, John. Thank you for testifying, and also thank you for bringing that to our attention as well. I think that's something for us to be aware of. So we're going to move into the section of our agenda. We're going to talk about feedback on the provisional governance recommendation. So again, I'm putting in the chat pod the feedback that we received on that document within the conversations that we had. So we're going to go over that as a group and really want to hear from folks, you know, should we incorporate those items? If so, whose role, kind of what does that look like? This is going to inform that update to the provisional governance recommendation that's been mentioned, because we do have to vote on that final document in June. So just kind of a quick recap here. We did have 24 one-to-one meetings. Those were with elected officials, staffers, committees, councils, non-governmental organizations, things of that nature. And then 2 workshops. One was municipal focused and one was community focused. And that was between February 8th and May 20th. So we engaged about 117 people, give or take maybe 1 or 2. I think it's 117 exactly, but just in case that shifts up 1 or down, don't be surprised, because I might have missed somebody's name in my notes. But we did have this outreach effort that was underway. And then we're also still incorporating comments. So because of last week's weather, we did have to reschedule with East Louisiana. And then also we did have to reschedule with the Amite River Basin Commission for a full commissioners meeting. We did meet with Dietmar and Larry really sooner within this process, but they wanted to have a full commissioners meeting. So we're also waiting on that. And I think that is rescheduled for early June, if I'm remembering correctly. We'd also like to reach out to the soil and water conservation districts, additional NGOs, and then also it's possible that these conversations don't result in any changes to the recommendation from what we're seeing or looking over today. There are definitely themes and patterns, things that are mentioned a lot, but if there are additional things that come up, we're definitely going to make sure that we discuss those as a group during our next meeting. So we had all these meetings, and I also want to be transparent about this. This is not survey data. We had 24 one-to-one meetings. We had 2 workshops. Our friends at OCD had asked us to kind of on a gut feeling rank where those meetings fell between the spectrum of mostly supportive to mostly opposed. And so that's what you see here is a representation of the percentage of those meetings where we thought that they fell along the spectrum. So about 53 to 54% were mostly supportive. Over a third were mostly supportive with reservations. This is really one meeting where they were undecided or non-committal. And then we had 2 conversations where folks were mostly opposed, so less than 10%. And so for each of these categories, we kind of wanted to just bring up very briefly what each of these looks like. The way that your, I don't know if people can see me like this, but the provisional feedback, provisional guidance recommendation feedback worksheet is set up is it's in these same categories. So you can go through and you can see the specific items, or you can see how off, excuse me, that's not what that is showing, sorry. You can see what types of feedback were mentioned the most often. And so that feedback is in part what we're putting forward in this particular slide. I said that a little backwards. So if anybody's confused, tell me and I will explain it again. But for mostly supportive, we heard that we need a regional forum for collaboration, technical assistance, capacity building, to be able to incentivize consistency for standards. A couple of direct quotes that we felt fit within this category are, "These rivers have been here forever. We just have to make it work better." And the context of that conversation was around nature-based solutions and being able to work across jurisdictions for the purpose of watershed management. And then when the general public is educated, they are fierce warriors. So again, really thinking about capacity building, not just from an institutional perspective, but also from an on-the-ground perspective, so that we can have our residents become more informed in ways that actually also support making this work better. For mostly supportive with reservations, we heard a lot of the same things from the mostly supportive category. And then we also heard that there were perhaps some concerns about being in competition with others in the region. So I think really thinking about resource scarcity was something that some folks were also considering. For undecided or non-committal, we still heard that the work needs to be done, but that particular conversation, they were unsure how to align if they're not sure where the parish stands on it. So they really needed more information. For mostly opposed, we really heard that there were concerns with having another layer of bureaucracy, saying we even heard from somebody that the effort is not necessary at all. We also heard that the region should be split, and if it is not split, they would not like to participate. And then there's also concerns about overlapping authorities with existing institutions. I think this comment in particular, as well as bureaucracy, came up in a couple of these other conversations too. So I don't want to just isolate it to only this category because there are valid concerns within that as well. All right, so we're going to go through this feedback, y'all. For the steering committee members, I have this broken down, and for everybody else who's listening on the line, again, and I'll put this in the chat pod just one more time, just in case other people have joined, dropped, and had to rejoin or anything. Link in the chat pod is a link to the worksheet. So what you can do with that is you can fill out your thoughts in it, either digitally or in handwriting. You can send that to me within about 2 weeks of this meeting. But what we're going to do here is go through these items, and then I'm going to actually record what we're hearing from the steering committee as well. So let me go ahead and pull that document up, and we'll make it bigger. So hopefully everybody can see it. I will scroll down as much as I can. Here we go. Okay. So you'll see a couple of different categories here. You see most mentioned, mentioned often, mentioned sometimes, and then least mentioned. And so essentially all the feedback from each of these conversations was recorded, and each of these kind of items were recorded per conversation. So essentially if it was brought up, that was recorded or indicated in a quantitative method. And then we went back and based on the total number of responses within each of that bucket, how many times it was mentioned across all of those different conversations that we had. So that's what you see. The most mentioned are the ones that were the most mentioned. And then least mentioned were only mentioned a couple of times in conversation. So I didn't want to make an assumption that we would go ahead and incorporate all of the items that are in the most mentioned section. Wanted to have a conversation about it, but I thought it was a good starting point. So for this item on a regional collaborative forum to share information and best practices, what we heard from folks a lot here was even just having the space for people to talk to each other. Does anybody see any issues in incorporating that explicitly into the recommendation? Or would you like to make any changes or edits?
I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that.
And then if you do see an issue with this and you're not comfortable speaking up in this venue, please feel free, again, fill this out and send it to me. So we'll say now, incorporate. I'm gonna look at the chat pod. I saw a notification pop up. No worries, John, take care. John Clark's got to sign off. Since 73% of the conversations, capacity building and support, including project design to level the playing field and incorporate best practices to be able to submit applications came up. And again, I think this was just being able to keep up with, I think, really the charge that's been set up by the Watershed Initiative, and then also some of these new funding mechanisms through the federal government. So has anybody seen any reason why we should not do this?
I have trouble with the word including project design. Who?
Can you tell me more?
About? Who are you talking about? Is this the regional agency that is going to be the project designers? That's my question. Because, for example, United States Army Corps of Engineers, we want a project, but we don't have the money. So the United States, somehow a great senator representative gets us the money. We have to come up with the local match. And so the Army Corps of Engineers is told, we want to do this project. The United States Army Corps of Engineers designs the project through consultants internally, what have you. So when it comes to that, that's in the context I'm asking the question. You're talking about little projects, a little drainage here, little drainage there. Still, that is the responsibility more of the local government than of a regional agency of any sort. You need to have the expertise in your staff to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Dietmar. I appreciate that. And so what I'm hearing here is be explicit about who this benefits, and then also be explicit that this is about competitive processes. So the process that you're talking about with the Corps, where they have a feasibility study, and then they have several different projects that they would like to consider. This is not necessarily talking about that, because they have their own process by which they are going to determine which projects meet their BC ratio, right? So their cost benefit analysis. Really, this is specific to rounds 2 and 3 for funding, as well as other funding mechanisms that are competitive processes. So we can think about FEMA's BRIC program, for example. And then, you know, I think within the context of this as well, we're not necessarily suggesting that CRPC would be the brain trust of all this. We're not, you know, saying that we're going to have a landscape architect on staff or anything of that nature. So it's a good question for us to be able to answer. But what does it look like for us to be able to host and build spaces where we can have conversations at a regional level and perhaps at sub-basin levels with folks who need to be in the room about coming together to create and design regional projects that are also going to be able to be competitive in those competitive processes. I hope that answers the question.
Hey, Rachel, this is Earl. I just want to pipe in with Dietmar. I'm not sure I agree with project design being a part of this. I just can't support it if it's in there. There's too many question marks. I mean, like you said, how big a project, what kind of project, who gets the designs, what if it doesn't get funded? I don't see it. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't
Rachel,
read
I
this.
have a question.
I just wanted to mention too, also that from a design standpoint, you know, we have rules and regulations on how we have to select consultants to go through a design board, you know, to be selected through a formal process. So, you know, I'm not too sure that language would fit in also for us, but and I also would concur with Dietmar by the fact that, you know, when a Corps comes in and gives you funds to do a project, they have to do all the engineering, they have to do all the evaluation, they have to also be able to provide if it's an impact upstream or downstream. That's exactly what happened to us with our tributaries project. But I wouldn't necessarily want to have to go through a board again to be able to get these projects approved, because I would assume that they would meet those requirements, because this whole program that we're trying to look at is trying to address the water conditions that we're dealing with throughout the state, but also still allow for parishes to be able to make their improvements where they see fit, as long as this doesn't create impacts upstream or downstream.
I read this
I read
a little
I
different.
read this a little differently, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Bridget. I'm just thinking, I know that we have like including for project design, like in parentheses for this one, but if you take that out and just read capacity building and support for project design to level the playing field, I read that to mean we're here to support any community that's really wanting to address their water issues and maybe apply for projects, and they don't have the capacity to do that because they don't have the expertise, and they're relying on us as being their support system to do so, including not just building that capacity so they can network with us, but using the support system they have to have the experts that are at the table as part of our collective regional group to give them some guidance when it comes to support regarding their project design or what they maybe need to be looking for their bids for. I don't see it as you have to come to this group to get a blessing if you want to apply for funding for projects in the future. I see it as a resource to those that don't have those resources independently, and we are that resource clearinghouse for them. That's just the way I interpret that, and maybe the wording could be capacity building and support for project design as needed, to level the playing field or something along those lines, just for a little more clarity, I think, rather than it making the assumption that it means you'd have to have a clearinghouse and go through this group to get your design represented. I don't see it as that, but obviously others do.
No, that's not
Bridget,
what I'm saying.
I agree with.
I'm not seeing it that way. I'm not seeing I'm not reading it that way. I'm just saying that I don't think project design should be in the wheelhouse of regional group at all. Support for it, maybe, but if I don't know how to say it. I mean, if you tell me that there's a capability to do some design work with at the regional level, I promise you my grants person is going to apply for every single project we do in your region to divert that cost if they can. So, and then like was mentioned earlier, we have a selection process that, hit on either.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of read it as Bridget did. In St. Tammany, you probably have a few PhDs, engineers on staff, as well as probably close to 20 engineers on staff, as well as professional planners and floodplain managers. Our capacity is pretty good here. So how I read this was for the communities that don't have the capacity to be able to use this group, this regions, as a way to assist them, not necessarily for project quote unquote engineering design, but as project in design of how something may work or how you may apply for some funding, whereas you might need a scope of work, your purpose and need, what the goals are things like that. I didn't really read this as actual design work stamped by an engineer for construction. I just took this as, hey, here's an opportunity to provide capacity for people who may not have it. So that's, if it can be worded differently.
Yes, and I'll second that, Ross. We had a very long discussion about this exact question on a previous call. So I'm just gonna follow the ship crew and say that we did discuss that it was just about providing capacity to those communities that did not have the ability to access best practices. There was no authority given in the thought process. So definitely just wording needs to be specified.
I agree with that as well. Here in St. John Parish, we don't have an engineer on staff. I'm one of probably 2 planners in the parish. And, the way I read this as well was really more project conceptualization. Architectural engineering design, certainly that comes from the parish, but having a clearinghouse of, collaborators to identify new solutions that are going to be as competitive as applications from East Baton Rouge, St. Tammany, and other large parishes would really be, tremendous for a small parish like St. John.
Hey, Renee, that's a
I hate
great
to
point.
tell you this.
And that was a great way of saying conceptualize, so if anybody on this call or in this region would want to tap into staff from St. Tammany, I'd be more than happy to provide some technical expertise if someone was to reach out like Renee. So that's kind of, again, how I read it, but I'm sorry, Dietmar, go ahead.
No, I just want to say to Rachel, well, not to Rachel, but to everybody, what needs to really be done is to look how the system works now, good and bad, and work around that. And because what I see here, I see a lot of potential conflicting things that might show up if we don't know what we're talking about. So in my opinion, somebody needs to sit back and say, okay, how do we fund these things? Okay, big projects, I tell you, by default, federal. has to be federal participation. We do not have enough tax base to do them. So what we do is put local funds into this. We in Meade River Basin have a tax authority, etc. So that is the process for the big projects, no matter how you measure it. Then you come back to a lower level. You have to stratify what you're talking about. If you come down to a subdivision where you say, oh my gosh, if we put this little beautiful pond in here, it will resolve the problem in the subdivision for the how you say, the small rainfalls, for the small amount of rainfall. That's a different issue together. But that needs to be defined very well, understanding the existing process. It has to be worked around the existing process, that we don't screw up the existing process, the one that works, and work around it. And if we can make it better and so on and so forth, let's do it. That's the way I see it.
So Dietmar, I want to flag something in what you just said, just because I want to make sure that we're all like sharing the same goal here that we're working toward. I kind of take issue with what you're saying as we need to look at the current situation of what I think of as the project pipeline, how something goes from a need in an area that floods in a parish to a project that addresses that need. I don't think that we need to be limited by working around the existing system. I think that some in this region specifically are recognizing that that system is not serving them optimally. And this is your opportunity to create a system in this region that serves y'all better, right? So I would hate to think that we're limited by thinking about what's the existing way that projects get funded. And I hear what you're saying, that to a degree, some processes are kind of locked in. For example, like you're saying, the Corps of Engineers process for how they're going to fund a project, that's not really up for debate. Totally agree. But I'm also not hearing a reason why some municipalities that, as we've heard, don't have the in-house capacity that they feel they need, why those municipalities wouldn't benefit from coming together and working with other partners and allies in the region to make their project ideas better or to make them real, right? To get them in the pipeline for funding. So I want to hear from y'all, what is the solution? Not just let's work around the old system of doing business, because clearly that's not getting us where we need to be.
Hey, this is Major Coleman, Catalina Parish. I would like to speak to that. Give you a typical example. We small and rural. That was a funding opportunity for the parish, and we were not able to provide the data to go into the application to even apply for the grant. So with this conversation, I would love to see that support from an organization like the Louisiana Watershed Steering Committee. So if we would have had this organization at that time, maybe we could have got the data from this committee, or we could have got the help from somebody in the region to help us get the data that we needed to provide in the application. So I agree with Bridget and Ross. I don't see it as a clearinghouse saying that we have to provide the data and all that. It's just, to me, it's a support system would help a parish like me.
I agree, but what I am saying is that needs to be defined. The language is too general for interpretation. And we got an attorney, two at least right now, listening. And I said, if you do not define exactly what the heck you're talking about, you're talking in generalities, later on that can be interpreted in 10 different ways. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about don't fool with the system that works, it's because you don't want to do that. Don't fool with the system that works. But all of these other things you're talking about, I have no problem. I understand what you're talking about, small projects and helping the communities and so on and so forth. I'm not against that. What I'm saying is all of that needs to be looked at and defined as exactly as we can, so that we know what this means. Right now, to me, it seems to be too general. That's all.
So what I'm hearing though from y'all is not that you shouldn't embark on this path, right, of working together to improve the project pipeline. What I'm hearing is you need details to further design your vision on like what that looks like, right? And I want to be cautious in talking about this, because a lot of the comments that I hear are, well, we should really know more about this. We should, not do anything too hastily. This group was selected because y'all live and breathe floodplain management or, capital improvements projects or, parish management. Y'all do this every day. Y'all are the experts. I would caution that we shouldn't say, let's wait and figure out what we mean. To me, it's flooding every month, sometimes in this part of the year, multiple times a week. I don't know that this group should wait to move on something that I think you all are very informed about and are in fact the experts on.
Evelyn, I'd agree with you. And I think going through this process, it's, I don't know how much slower we can go. And we're taking this very judiciously, very slowly, and very, detail oriented way. These, and what we're talking about now, these are just items that were pulled from those 24 or so, I guess, meetings of, comments that came up the most often. We're not saying we're taking this language and putting it into the bylaws and this is what it's going to be. We're taking this language and dissecting it with the group as a whole, so we can all either, agree or not to agree on if those sentiments that were most, I guess, stated, are in fact so. I mean, and that's why. So those were one-on-one. Now this is the group coming back together to figure out, are these the items from those individual meetings as a group? Do we agree? Not saying these are going to go straight into the bylaws as is. This is just for the next step. And I'll turn it back over to Rachel.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. I appreciate grounding us back in that. And I just want to be explicit. The provisional governance recommendation itself, it's not actually a legal document. Right? Those aren't bylaws. It's not charter. It's none of that. And so, I know there have been some comments and concerns about how explicit or non-explicit this is written into those things. And I think also I would caution against making things as explicit as possible, because I think whenever we are experiencing what we're experiencing right now with such dramatically, or not dramatically, but changing environmental conditions and governmental conditions and programmatic conditions and over time, that the last thing that we need to do is to be able to write ourselves into a box. And so I think whenever we're thinking about what are those overlapping rules, regulations, who has control, who doesn't have control, that's not necessarily that is actually something that's represented within the legal document, right? That is something that is how we have authority, if we have authority, and how we implement on that. Those are two different things here. And so I don't want us to get too caught up in thinking that this is going to be written verbatim into a legal document, because that's probably not what's going to happen. Like I feel I'm not writing those legal documents, but I know OCD staff is working on some of that, but I can't imagine that these things are going to be written verbatim in there. So what I'm hearing is a lot that we need to change the language on here. I hear that loud and clear. We will do that, and we'll have an updated provisional governance recommendation that we're going to send out to folks ahead of time. And we would love for y'all to wordsmith it, ask questions, redline it, whatever you would like to do. So we'll keep working on that language until it works. The next item, support for better, consistent, and more clear flood resilience standards for subdivision and drainage regulations. To be clear, people were not saying that we come in and we have authority to be able to set those. People were not saying that we're the entity that enforces them. They were really saying, again, with regards to this capacity building, that folks actually would like to hear what other places across the region are doing, what other places across the state are doing, and to be able to think about, okay, I don't know, I just see Ross on my screen right now. So like, what's St. Tammany doing? How did y'all do it? What were your obstacles? and then being able to have some support to be able to work on those as they would like to, or if they do it all, right? It's something that's a decision here. I don't know if anybody has any things that you're seeing as a flag here.
I don't see any flags, but I will just iterate that I think that that's really needed for small parishes to get that information from more sophisticated bodies.
Renee, and I'll disagree that it's, I agree it's needed for small parishes, but I also disagree that, we also need it here in St. Tammany. For the past, 2 weeks or so, we've been meeting with officials from Slidell, Mandeville, well, actually Slidell's tomorrow, Mandeville and Covington, because it was a fractured way of we were doing things in St. Tammany. Yes, those are municipalities, but as a whole, I mean, look, our traffic and drainage problems don't stop at the political boundaries. So, I started meeting with planning directors from those cities as well. And just to get all on the same page and make sure that we are supporting each other for, their subdivisions and drainage regulations. And again, just trying to be more collaborative on a smaller scale in a big parish. So yeah, I agree with you, Renee.
Absolutely. And speaking from the industry, we want to be a part of those conversations, and we don't want parish or city lines to create headache or costly regulation that it doesn't benefit the end user, us as residents. So I definitely support this statement and collaboration so industry can be a part of creating the solution.
Thanks, y'all. So what I'm hearing is this sounds great. It's needed. We got to do it in partnership with one another, and we got to think about our homeowners at the end of that too, right? Got that work with Georgetown for the affordable housing at the intersection of flood risks. That's I don't have to tell y'all that lumber is expensive. I think everybody knows that now, right? Houses just got more expensive. All right, so repository of technical data and information, including models at the state level. And this is one of the things too, y'all, which is this says, should we incorporate this? If so, is this our role? So we're asking, is that our role? Is that something that we work with the state on? Where, like, is this something that would be helpful, which we heard from folks that it would be? And if so, how do y'all envision that if it is helpful?
I can tell you on St. James's, and we just, with this last flood we had last week, we actually put on the homepage of our website a model that shows your elevation, your home elevation. Told people, if you need to sandbag, if you're at, a 3-foot elevation. So people can go access the website, click on where their house is at, and it'll show them their actual elevation that they would know to go sandbag. So I think something like that would be very helpful.
Well, I just learned something. So that proves it right there.
Absolutely. And I think data, if we're driven by data and we're trying to figure out fact-based, science-based solutions, this is a great collaboration. So great idea.
Okay, thanks, y'all. Also learned something, Ryan. I knew that y'all, we had that conversation. You were talking about y'all's efforts in making sure that folks' homes didn't flood ahead of time, and that was a significant effort for y'all. But I had no idea that your website did that. So that's
Right.
also something learned for
So
me.
we took data from 2016, and we knew the homes that took water for 2016. So we knew what elevations that would be. So we just told the residents to plug that in, and it looked like it was a success, and it to where we are saying we needed to drop 2 to help the residents as well.
I wonder, Evelyn or Tori could, or Ryan, if you have access, would love to have that dropped in the chat pod just to see, so that folks could be able to see that, if that's okay. This one feels a little bit repetitive, I think it's definitely in tandem with the one above, but leveraging existing data and resources across the state and region. I'm seeing head shakes. Does anybody disagree with that? When we say leveraging, we heard comments that it would be leveraging within this kind of like repository. It would be leveraging through these spaces. We also heard that we wanted to make sure that local academic institutions are connected to the relevant and most up-to-date information that the parishes are collecting, because y'all spend a lot of money to be able to get your own data and information, and sometimes it's not always incorporated. So we heard a few things there, but does anybody see an issue with creating this type of supporter space? Thanks, Ryan. No. Okay. We also heard guidance on how to use model data and information, and I think this is depending on who you talk to and what type of capacity folks have. So for the H&H models at the state level that are still under development right now, having guidance on how to use those, as well as other data sets were something that we had heard could be supportive. Does anybody have any specific thoughts or questions, comments, concerns with that?
All what I want to tell you is that models is like milk. It gets sour very quickly. So models are wonderful tools, but that's what they are. And they have to be upgraded by people that really know what they're doing. And doesn't require a lot of update, but nevertheless it does. And it's not that it's a problem, it's how to interpret the information from the models and the understanding for the public what it means. Because it's not when you say model, people think, oh my gosh, that is it. This is exactly what it's going to be, and so on, so on. That is not true. And so you have to be very careful in using the data. Even the professionals know that. So when you give it to the public, you have to be very aware of that. It's not as simple as you might think. It's like looking at the FEMA map and tells you what the 100-year flood elevation is, and even that is wrong. But yeah, the model is just the model, and it has to be upgraded very, very often, actually. And so just to keep that in mind, that whatever information they're getting, you have to put some qualifications to it, what it really means.
Yeah, I agree with Dietmar. So I would ask that guidance on how to use model data and information would be twofold. One, that would be for internal use by the parishes, for updating the model, using the model, manipulating the model. And the second would be how to present this information to the general public, how to convey it. Because you don't want to present that information, the same information out to the general public. It needs to be a different way of communicating. So I would just mention that.
I will also echo the fact that, all parishes are going to probably be looking at their own models. And at some point, we got to be consistent about what we use. So we'll all be on the same page, particularly if we're going to deal at a state level. That's going to look at the actual modeling and be sure that it complies with, say, our region that we're in. I mean, because they may end up with 8 or 9 different models, but I mean, that is something that I think it will be a challenge, but I think it's something that we need to be sure we address that on the front end. Because you using 2 different models, you're going to get 2 different results. There's no question.
That's really helpful. So I have recorded here, consider the updates over time, how often those occur, considering consistency within that same vein. So what models, data, et cetera, that we're using, and addressing that on the front end. I know, Fred, y'all have a significant effort that's happening with Stormwater Master Plan over there.
Right.
So I think that comes to mind. Go ahead, please.
Well, and I would just say that, yeah, we have moved a good ways on the modeling, but a lot of that is what we've also picked up from the state because I didn't want to pay for it twice, number one. But secondly, I thought it was more appropriate for us to try to be consistent and be sure that the data, especially within our region, that we have that data on the Amid River, the Comid River, and now we're doing the reaches up within the major channels to be able to get better and more defined information on what those impacts are going to be. So I mean, I don't really have a problem with local or state level for that, but I just want to be sure whatever we do, let's be sure that it's consistent and we're using one model to determine whether that impact is good or bad. And I don't disagree with Dietmar also, the fact that it's only as good as it is today. Data changes every day, development changes every day, streets are get put in. So all that stuff has to be updated periodically for us to be really to the point where we know what we have to deal with.
I just want to say this, that coming the end of July, first part of August, we're going to unveil an inundation map, electronic inundation map of the basin of the 2016 event, utilizing the models that are available, Army Corps of Engineer model and or DOTD model. When that time comes, you will receive some invitation. We're going to have a little bit of a public display or something like that. I don't know that yet.
Great. Looking forward to seeing that data and information too. Okay. Also at this point, we heard kind of twofold here. So internal use by parishes, and then how we talk about that information with general public. For the next section, so we have local government capacity building and training on flooding, resilience, climate. I know climate is not necessarily something that is of interest across the whole region. So this would be really thinking about what is specific to each locale, if you will. But within this context, we'd heard ideas for train the trainer programs. And I think the state, y'all have been working on like a CFM apprenticeship program. So this is kind of an example for that. So for folks who are certified floodplain managers, being able to partner with other folks who are wanting to get that certification, and then being able to kind of partner up and go through that process together. We also heard, really being able to, it's, I can't ever fully understand what it's like to work in local government. That's one of the scales that I have not worked at, but I know that y'all wear many hats. And so having somebody who can come in and be able to provide some training and information, I've been told by folks is really helpful. So they don't have to scour the web or have to sign up for these different trainings that are far away in some cases. Does anybody have thoughts about that?
Hey, this is Earl. The only thing I would ask is that you've alluded to it already, to stay within in the context of some existing training and some existing certifications, because those will benefit everybody, in my opinion, more than if we tried to make up something new.
Yeah, it may even go toward a credit for your certification. Who knows?
Or towards your CRS rating.
Yep, that's important too.
All really, really good points. Yeah, get as many CRS points as possible so we can lower those rates for folks. So really, really good ideas. Support for interpretation of data. I think we might skip this one because we've covered this through other ones, I think. So what we might do is combine this along with, let me see, a couple of these others that we've talked about. So leveraging existing data and guidance on how to use model data and information, unless somebody disagrees with that. We've also heard localized outreach and engagement efforts on resilience, flooding, climate change relationships to impact other sectors. Again, climate change was not brought up in every single conversation. I know that, again, there are some folks across the region where that's not perhaps something that's of interest. So But we did hear that folks would like to be able to have outreach to general public as well as to other sectors. So for example, people were talking about what does it look like to incorporate this information with school systems, things of that nature. Are there any thoughts, ideas on this one, or are we okay to move forward on that? Seeing head nods. Okay. Minimum standard requirements to be able to access funds. When we say minimum standard requirements, the context of these conversations, y'all, again, it is not the region having authority. It is not the region enforcing things. It is through the context and conversation of to be able to compete competitively for projects, the region might actually want to say, these are some standards that we would like for you to have to be able to compete competitively. I'm sure folks have some thoughts about this, so I would love to be able to hear more on those.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Really just a little bit more either background or example would probably help.
Yeah, that's fair. So I think, I'm trying to think of a specific example because I don't want to use the specific person. So I think that folks were saying that as an incentive for folks to be able to adopt or incorporate higher standards. So let's, I don't know, Freeboard is always the go-to, I think, as an example. So we'll use Freeboard. So we'll say, in order to be able to compete competitively for a process, we would like for you to be in the process of or have already adopted a foot of Freeboard at the local level. Another one that could be something that we've heard of, which I think there are capacity challenges to both of these, which should be addressed simultaneously with this as well, if it's something that the group wants to consider, is participating as a CRS community. We know that takes capacity internally to be able to do it.
And who would be the entity requesting the minimum standard and the funds? So that would be the state, like Watershed Initiative, and then
so through the Watershed Initiative process, or if there are other funds that come through that process. So right now there's CDBG MIT funds. If there are other funds that flow through the initiative to the regions for the purpose of project selection, this would kind of be one of those project selection criteria, if you will.
Well,
so my thoughts on this would be just right now, I would just need more information, I guess. I'm not sold on it one way or another. I just kind of need probably a little bit more detail. I think that was Dietmar.
Yeah, look, I kind of agree what you're saying. It's already, I'm go back to the same old story. There is an existing system already called Community Rating System that I've seen it written, the acronym written in many of your documents that exist from FEMA. And God help us, hopefully they will maybe still in business by the time all of this gets started. But they got a system. I believe the Community Rating System, the document by itself is a fairly good document. Encourages local communities to take action in terms of minimizing flooding. And so there's already a guideline, there's already information. The point I'm making again is we don't want to duplicate. We should not duplicate. We should utilize, if it's a federal, it's not a watershed, it's not a state or nothing like that. But it is there already for under FEMA regulations. There might be some other things going on right now. As a matter of fact, the whole movement is going from FEMA, 100-year flood maps and stuff like that, into pure risk assessment in the private sector, believe it or not.
Dietmar, can I ask you a question on this point? Because I hear you making a similar point to what you've made before, kind of reiterating programs that exist. And I would venture to say that those on the call today are pretty familiar with the landscape of what exists now. I'm wondering though, from this group, and all of y'all feel free to jump in and answer this question that I'm posing to you. Sure, CRS exists, right? That program exists. Clearly that's not a sufficient incentive to get every community at intense flood risk where they need to be from a policy perspective to continue to have safe development. I think we would all agree that, our development standards in some areas are not necessarily matching up with our extreme flood risk profile. And therefore, we're not building as safely as we could be. So what I'm saying is the CRS program clearly isn't the sufficient only tool in the toolbox to make that happen. Otherwise, it would have happened by now. I'm wondering if that's what this group is getting at, is that you see maybe better incentives as being the way to have better policy, or maybe you see, is there a combination of a carrot and a stick that can lead us to a place, as Karen said, where you don't want unnecessary regulations. You want just enough to keep people safe. But I would argue that we're not in that place right now across the board everywhere. Otherwise, we wouldn't be flooding so much.
I agree and disagree. This has to be a evolutionary process, not dictated process. To get things done, let me tell you my experience of 50 years in this field. You go through an evolution process in developing ordinances, regulations, and everything else. It cannot be done overnight. It's pressured by development, by population densities, and all of that stuff. I see this more in the context of evolution. And so we need to start from what we have, how to make it better, and learn in the process on how to make it better. You cannot do that a priori, no matter how intelligent we think we are. You cannot.
So what I'm saying, though,
that's what I'm saying.
I want to make sure that we let others jump in on this conversation, because I think, I'm definitely hearing what you're saying, that there are, an incentive structure that exists right now, but I want to make sure that we give others a chance to jump in on, I certainly don't want this group to spin its wheels saying we have to figure out what we're dealing with. I think we know what we're dealing with. What I want to hear is, what do y'all want to do about it? Does anyone want to jump in on that?
Evelyn, I have some thoughts, on what Dietmar said about the CRS program. It does exist. And many communities are taking advantage of it, including St. John Parish. But what I like about minimum standards, I am with Ross in that I need a little more information to firmly confirm that I would be in agreement for that. But what minimum standards do, in my opinion, is puts the region and its parishes on the same even playing field. If we're all implementing a set of minimum standards, whether it's through CRS or some other sort of standards, we can be assured that, and elected officials can be assured that, there is no undue competition from, down the road who maybe isn't implementing freeboard or, something else that might increase the cost of construction, et cetera. So I think being on the same playing field can have I think that can be a positive effect regionally, both for economic development.
Can I jump in real fast? Sorry, guys. I'm not in your region. My name is Allison Hartling. I work with UNO Chart. And I just wanted those of you that may not be aware, we work with your CRS coordinators for those of you that have communities that participate in the CRS. And I just wanted to let you know that CRS came out with an addendum in January that all communities are going to have to adopt and enforce at least 1 foot of freeboard for residential buildings in all numbered zones of the special flood hazard area to maintain their Class 8 status. So regardless of if your region decides to pass a region-wide ordinance that would require that, for your communities that do participate in the CRS, if they want to maintain their 8 status, they're going to have to implement that.
Thanks, Allison. Would you mind putting some information from UNO Chart in the chat pod? UNO Chart also worked with GOSEP on their updates for Allison. You can describe this better than me. Can you tell me what y'all have worked with them on?
Sure. And again, guys, sorry to interrupt your meeting. But yes, Chart has worked in the past with GOSEP on developing a statewide CRS strategy. We do a lot of work in flood mitigation of all kinds, including, the benefits and drawbacks of elevation, and freeboard requirements. But yeah, we're doing all kinds of stuff in this arena, and I'm happy to put my email in the chat if you want to reach out.
And
That's
Allison,
We're going
if
to
I'm
run into
hearing
a
you
lot of
right,
problems here.
Renee, one of the issues that I feel like I'm hearing from both of y'all, and I don't want to assume what you're saying, Renee, but I know we go back a while, and maybe I'm, just pulling this from my past experience working at the parish level. But, one thing that I hear in the CRS users group and across the state and other regions too, is we really need to think about banding together on policy issues, because, if a single parish, like you're saying, is trying to, pass a freeboard ordinance because they want to remain or move up in the CRS program, and they're out there on their own, that's one thing. But if all the parishes in a region say, hey, this is a comprehensive approach that we're going to try to take together, and yeah, the region is not going to enforce these rules, right? The rules they live in the parish ordinance, but we're going to commit to trying to do it together and support each other. I think that's a more compelling argument to people who might push back on safer building standards, right?
I agree. That's exactly correct. Everything takes place at the parish. In us, we call them parishes here, not counties. All of this governance takes place at that level. I don't believe a regional agency like Capital Region or any other regional agency in the state of Louisiana has the authority to do that. They might say, well, it's wonderful to do this, but that's about it. They cannot do more unless the legislature gives them that governance, gives them that authority. But
I don't think anyone's making that
they're
up.
purely, an agency that can recommend these things, but that's about it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we're saying here is, if one of the things that this regional entity may have some autonomy over is to be able to create a project selection process, that within that, the minimum standard requirements are things that would be recommended by the region. Again, we're not suggesting that the region is the enforcer of these things, and I think if there is a clearer way for me to say that, I would love for somebody to let me know. I can put it in writing. We can do it in many other ways, but I don't know how else to make that clearer. So we do have a lot of other things that we got to get through today. So for support for more holistic planning processes, I don't know that anybody is going to be in disagreement with that. So, is anybody in disagreement with that? Okay, seen some head shakes. Thank you. Upstream, downstream coordination. We heard, again, just being able to work together through a regional collaborative forum to talk about the different things that we're experiencing, as well as how do we actually manage water together. This last week, I know certainly there were some instances that have come up where people have talked about this. Does anybody disagree with that?
Okay. I wanted to say that when you say upstream, downstream, in the particular case that we're facing in this region, is that we got the lower part all along the Pontchartrain and Manchac, that the flooding in those areas are kind of really different than riverine flooding. When you say imply upstream and downstream, implies riverine. And so riverine in the Emmett River Basin stops about at the probably at the Manchac, or a little bit upstream from there, if you might consider riverine. That is caused by the dynamics of the river itself. From that point on, it is a mix. It's the water coming down, the floodplain expands, it spreads out, and most important, under the wrong conditions, a southeast wind creates havoc. So it's a completely different dynamics down there that has nothing to do with upstream and downstream to some degree. But so all what I am saying, there has to be, in our particular case, we need to define that a little bit some language, ameliorating language that can make that distinction somehow, make it better defined. So what we're talking about.
Thanks, Dietmar. So further define what we mean when we say this. Got that. Be able to provide information, have a technical expert run models and provide outputs. I think we heard this from a lot of our communities that don't necessarily have the capacity on staff. And so I think Major Coleman, you were talking a little bit earlier about if you'd had some access to data and information, you would have been able to turn in a grant application. So I think this is something that could apply to everybody, but I think really that's what we were hearing that from. And when we say to be able to run the models, we talk about those that are going to be, that are currently under development with the state. As mentioned earlier, any of the comments that were mentioned earlier, we don't need to repeat those here because I think they apply here as well. So making sure that when it comes to outreach and engagement around those, we're being clear about what the model can and can't do. That message should be different for internal staff versus public facing. And then also making sure that we're doing things consistently. So does anybody have anything additional to say about this or think we shouldn't do it?
I want to say this, Rochelle, going through this list, when you say capacity building, does anybody realize how wide the issues, how all of these elements are? You have how many? 20 elements in here. How many people have to be hired to address all of those issues? In other words, we have the full spectrum from planning to project. Are the same person or persons making decisions in all of those fields? I mean, that's a really serious issue that needs to be addressed.
I don't disagree with you, Dietmar. And again, the purpose of this document is to be able to figure out what the regional activities could look like in terms of staffing. I think there are a lot of questions that we have that exist out there that we're going to have to use to answer that. And I would also say in part that the composition or structure of this eventual transition from the steering committee to the coalition might actually meet some of those needs. And so I think we got to figure out what are the activities that are needed, what are our needs, and then how do we address those? If we can't address all of those internally, how do we lean on support from different state agencies, from other regions, from other folks that are within this conversation and call right now? So this is really a collaborative effort. And so we have about 20 minutes left in this section, and I'm trying to think about how we're spending time here, y'all. So what we might do, I'm going to pitch this and just let me know. We've got this worksheet. Folks can fill it out. You can do that in writing and scan it and send it to me. You can do it digitally and send it to me. You can call me and we can have a conversation about the individual items, or we can schedule something. You can even send it all to me via email. But I'm going to recommend that we move on from this particular item and get to one item in here that I wanted us to talk about. Is that okay? I thought this would go faster. Sorry, y'all. That was misguided on my part. Thanks, Fred. Appreciated having you today.
I want to say on the record, and have it printed 10 times. I am against the concept of a super agency. I don't care who it is, what it is, and when it is. I disagree with absolute power. And I want to say that in the general concept, this is beginning to look like a super agency superimposed over state agencies and everything else that we have. And I completely, arrogantly disagree with this. That's all what I have to say.
I want to ask Dietmar, with regards to that, why? My first question is why? And then what's the motivation behind that?
You're asking me a question?
Yes.
What is the question? I wasn't paying attention.
I said why. So in response to what you just said, please tell me more. Why? And then what is the motivation behind that?
I have no motivation. I see this, that is just, I've never seen anything like that in my life. It's just too much. We're trying to put an agency together that encompasses everything. It's very difficult. There are so many, the variations of different things. You want to go from engineering to planning and all of the steps in between. That is giving too much authority to just one agency. So I have no motivation. My motivation is to keep everything balanced, basically.
All right, thank you. So next order of business that I wanted to make sure that we got through before the end of today's meeting, we got a couple other items as well. And if we find that we have additional time, then we will probably just end early instead of revisiting a couple of those items of feedback, just because I know it's been a long week for a lot of folks. So with the provisional governance recommendation, we did have folks talk about the regional boundaries. And so we wanted to bring up what the previous discussion has been. So we have this poll. This was during our October 13th, 2020 meeting, in the midst of many, many things, right? October seems like an eternity ago. And so after some discussion, folks agreed, at least 10 out of 14 people during that meeting said that the regional boundaries should remain as they're currently drawn. And so the comments at the time were, unless there's a significant reason to change them, don't. And that Amy River Basin Commission should be maintained. So those were the feedback at that point in time. You'll also find this, this information at the back, the very, very last page of that worksheet that we've been talking about. So in 23% of the conversations, which is about 6 conversations, 2 of which were with the same parish, 1 of which was with a municipality that was in that same parish. So 3 out of the 6 conversations that represent this 23% were within the same parish. And we heard that we should split the region into 7A and 7B. So just a little bit over 11% of those come within the same parish. The stated reason why were competition with St. Tammany Parish, resourcing for their organization, wanting to make sure that they were able to fund the things that they needed to fund, and maintaining organizational identity and jurisdictional boundary. One idea that we did hear was to be able to maintain the region with additional ways to have feedback at the sub-regional level. So for example, sub-goals that are specific to basins, subcommittees, and then also when decisions need to be considered at a different scale. So I wanted to open up the floor for feedback here if folks still think, the regional boundaries should remain as they're currently drawn, or if they should be changed.
I mean, I'm good with the boundaries, as presented. To me, this entity, whatever it may look like, feels sort of like an MPO, which has a good business model for transportation and everything transportation related, such as freight, bike, transit, vehicular. So I don't think a model of this size and stature, structure is unordinary, but I don't think it's something that we have used here for drainage or for watershed, for stormwater, for flooding events. And I think that model as an MPO, and again, I haven't worked for an MPO, but I've worked with them on transportation related issues. Seems like it's an appropriate way to govern a region. The evidence is there that it works. Although, of course, we do have traffic problems, but MPO can't solve everything. They don't have billions of dollars, or DOTD with a $12 billion backlog. And not sure what the background is on competition with St. Tammany, but we're a willing partner in the region. I didn't know that we weren't, but working collaboratively in the region is our goal. So if that is an issue, I welcome people to reach out to me. You can have a conversation or whatever we need to do to mitigate that, I guess.
Thanks, Ross. Are there other thoughts?
I like the boundaries as they are as well, Rachel. I think, I'm from St. John Parish's perspective, we obviously will face competition from any large parish within a region. However, I think the more lines you draw, regional entities and coordination around floodplain management is just necessary in Louisiana. But I think more boundaries might just create more levels of or intricacies that probably aren't needed.
Of course, we want to, Mead River Basin would like to have the region 7A, 7B, and maintain the integrity of the Mead River Basin Commission, its statutes and responsibilities, and be designated as one of either 7A or 7B as a watershed initiative for regional boundary. I mean, that's what we would like to see. That's all what I want to say.
I would just highlight for y'all, the past few weeks have had some events where both of the sides of this region, for some who see it as two distinct areas, were impacted. I mean, to me, this is, I'm not an RSC member, but to me, this is no longer really a decision point for this group. I'm hearing pretty consistent perspectives that you guys have been working together as a region so far, and that you don't see a need to change it. Deepmar, I know your comment just now was not to that effect, but when I look at the whole of the group, that is what I'm hearing overall.
So I'm just curious from other folks on the call. Let me see, Bridget, Earl, Ryan, where are y'all at with the drawing of the boundaries? You think they should remain the same?
Hey, this is
I
Earl.
agree that they should probably, go ahead, Earl.
I was just going to say, I'm such a small sliver of the parish. Any change you make will probably throw me right out. So I'm not saying anything.
And we'd love to keep you, Earl.
This is Bridget. I think we should probably keep the boundaries the same. I've said in prior meetings and discussions that I think it's going to come to a point to where we may have to have some sub-watersheds where there's particular strategies or goals that affect the environment for specific types of watersheds are going to be different, embedded differently. But I don't think we need to draw new boundary lines as a regional group, because we can benefit from each other and learn from each other collectively. So I don't really see the need to have different jurisdictional boundary lines. Really, I don't. But again, we are unique because I think we have, is it 4 or 5 of the 8 Huck 8 watersheds that affect our parish. So we're shared, kind of split down the middle. So it'd be difficult, and if we split it, I think we would wind up being in 2 separate sections. So we would be part of the collective group regardless on either side. And that would just be more meetings for me. I'd rather it just be one meeting.
Thanks, Bridget, for the honesty there. Let me see, Gary or Major. You got any thoughts?
This Major, I say leave it like it is. I don't have a problem with it like it is. I don't mind competing with St. Tammany.
Well, I mean, and I think some of our, I do want to say that Ross, in every single conversation I've had with him, has been nothing but supportive of these efforts. You know, and I think also that Ross has offered to be able to be a brainstorm partner, a partner in many other ways too. And so I just want to acknowledge and recognize that too, that sometimes our competition makes us better. And then also I think sometimes our competition can be our best ally. So what does it look like for us to compete with St. Tammany on larger scales too, right?
I don't see it as competing with them by them being part of this region. I don't see it compete with anybody, because I think we all should be one unit. I mean, and I don't think they'll be hard to work with, so I don't have a problem with it.
Thanks, Major.
Thank you, Major. I appreciate it.
You know, Major, I'm really glad to hear your comment just now. And I would love to hear more of the kind of the group's thinking specifically on the topic of the word competition and compete. Because, you know, as I look at, you know, we're looking at some of the areas of the state to the west that were hit by recent storms. I mean, you realize that no parish stands alone, right? Every time something hits a region, everybody has to pull together. Not only are your EOCs having to coordinate, but literally sometimes residents are displaced and relocate to a different community in that same region. And I think we would all do well to think about, like, as we talk about what this group does, what this next watershed body does, is a competition the best way for us to all get what we need out of this project, right? Like, is competing for projects actually serving us, or do we need to maybe think beyond the paradigm of competing with each other? Like, I would just love to hear y'all's kind of long-term vision on that, you know?
So you understand where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the point of view, it's not that I disagree. I'm coming from the point of view of governance. We have a governance, and we're going to we have another governance that's going to be regional. What governance is going to prevail? And this is going to have to go through the legislature, approved by the legislature. And then what does happen? Is our governance for the Amite River Basin are going to prevail in this region? We do not cover the full spectrum of issues that we address today in this meeting.
Dietmar, a lot of what I'm hearing.
So I have a problem with that. I mean, we don't know where do we stand as our governance is concerned.
A lot of what I'm hearing you say assumes a competition, though, and I guess that's what I'm asking to the greater group. And I think we definitely, I'm definitely hearing your perspective on, you know, if you're foreseeing a competitive confusion among, you know, multiple entities. I think that's what I'm hearing you say that you're concerned about. But my question to the group, and I don't just want to hear from ARBC, right? I want to hear from everybody. You know, if you are engaged in a regional approach where you're supporting each other with your technical capacities and pooling your resources in a way that is not a competition, could you go further together? That's really what I was wondering about.
Based on the screen that's currently shown, I would say I'm a 3. Not for the boundaries, but for what Evelyn just stated.
I agree with that.
And speaking, this is Karen, and speaking from the industry perspective, we talked about creating collaboration to build out consistency so our industry could plan. And it's often been, you know, stated and quoted that we wanted to do this as a regional approach. So I can't speak to the governance of all this and the authority given, but I do know that you know, a lot of science went into figuring out these watersheds, and we supported the science that went into it and said, okay, we'll do this throughout Region 7. This is what it looks like, and this will help us build the consistency that we were looking for.
Thanks.
Hey, this is Earl. I've got a comment on the question about working together as a region rather than in competition. Just gonna throw this out there. I have no clue what that would look like. It's been so long competing for projects from so many sources that, you know, I think it would take me a week to wrap my head around it. Because the fact is, even if we're not competing on this particular funding source, I cannot see where we won't be competing on every other funding source. It's a nice theory. I just don't know what that would look like, because, you know, when you're sandwiched next to the two largest population parishes in the state, and you're one of the smaller, it is all about competition for funds. So, you know, that's going to take some thought.
Thanks, Earl.
I see it as, if we're making decisions for projects that are affecting our communities, because water does not respect political boundaries. It just doesn't. I mean, look at last week. It's everywhere. So our solutions are going to have to be more comprehensive and not be specifically situational. So, you know, again, coming from a small community, I think it benefits you to be, not that this is maybe the most political way to say this, but to be on the coattails of a larger community that have those resources. Again, I don't necessarily see St. Tammany as much as an opponent as I do as a partner, because I know that Ross has the solutions and even has the resources that if we needed some outreach and we share a watershed, we share more than one, then we can figure out what are the issues that need to happen, and his resources can benefit my residents and my citizens if it's done correctly and it's done with that comprehensive approach. So I don't think it needs to be a competitive aspect. It needs to be looked at as a comprehensive aspect on how do we help those that are less resource rich, if you will, figuring out how to fix their own problems for their residents. That's what the regional approach is supposed to be about.
Oh, and I absolutely agree from a planning standpoint and from a coordination standpoint. I mean, you know, we've got levee building projects. We've got one with Jefferson. We've got a levee building project with St. John. We've got another one with Lafourche. We do know how to coordinate those things. But what I'm saying is, if you completely say, well, we can throw the competition out, I got to think about it.
Yeah, and that's not.
Do I want to work together? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to be the case, Earl. I mean, I agree with you 100%. We'll be collaborative on some projects and competing on some projects, and that's just how it is. But yeah, I agree with you.
You know, you mentioned watershed. There's 8 watersheds in Region 7. 8. We are one. And if you look, when you want to talk about watersheds, those watersheds over the millennium developed in that way. There's a ridge between them. And unless we have a biblical flood, these floods occur between those watersheds. You say the Emmett River Basin has the population center of Baton Rouge, but in the upper part is very rural. You take the Tangipahoa, is a watershed that encompasses several parishes. And so you're looking at the watershed. So each watershed is independent. The impact in the watershed in Tangipahoa River does not impact the problems in Baton Rouge, except below I-12. What I told you, everything over there is so flat that the water goes in all directions. So those watersheds, each one decides the priorities, upstream, downstreams, and in between. And the competitive aspect, I don't have any problem with the competitive aspect of it all. I don't know how that is going to evolve. We only talking about right now monies from community development, but over time, it's going to be all resources, primarily from the federal government, that are going to come down. And I think each watershed stands on its own legs, so to speak. And yeah, it has to be maybe an overall coordination, if you want to call it. But one watershed not necessarily affects the other watershed in those flooding events. Each one is assessed and categorized on its own, so to speak. And that's what I'm talking about. Now, the coordination that takes place, that has to do, if you want to call it, about how the resources can be allocated. But that is not an easy solution, like the gentleman that just mentioned. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, given the political realities as they are everywhere.
Thanks, everybody. I want to make sure that we're keeping on time as well. So I think based on what I'm hearing, this is for the updated provisional governance recommendation. This is the last conversation that we're going to have about boundaries. So we wanted to get this consensus-based exercise from the group. So based on what we're hearing, it sounds like the steering committee wants the boundaries to remain the same. If you could, within the chat pod, say 3, fully support. So I support this and its implementation. 2, support with reservations. By the way, these things in quotes, that's just an example. So just know that. So 2, support with reservations. 1, I have too many questions and I can't live with it. See, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. I think I saw a 2 earlier from Gary. Yes, it did. Okay, got another 3. Okay.
Major 3, I'm locked out to check.
Oh, thanks, Major. I'm gonna type that in for you. Anybody else who's on the phone, I can put it in the chat pod. I'm putting it in the chat pod so that I can record it on my end for later. So just know that. Okay, so what I'm hearing, and these are kind of drafted, so I'm going to need to adjust some of these for the provisional governance recommendation, is, we're going to have to vote on the final document during our June meeting. So what we're going to do is work to compile all of the feedback we got from this meeting, as well as the feedback y'all send us afterwards. And then we're going to recommend that we incorporate all items that have essentially like majority yes. So I'm going to change this. Majority in favor. And then recommend that we have conversations that we're unsure about to be able to be revisited. I'm gonna delete that because it's already written. And then items that are not favor are not incorporated. Does that sound okay? And we'll send y'all a document. My goal is to be able to send it to everybody 2 weeks ahead of time so that y'all can think about it, be able to talk to folks, and be able to provide us with some additional feedback.
I need a note needs to be made that there were only 7 or whatever 8 attendance about this discussion, not the 30 or 40 that were there at the beginning of the meeting. I don't know how many are attending now, but looking here at the roster myself, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Well, and let me make a recommendation,
9, 10.
Dietmar.
It's 12 as far as I'm concerned. And so
let me make a recommendation
here.
here.
I think that is important. No, let me finish. I think that is important. I'm sorry. That's what I want to say, and I quit right here.
Thanks, Dietmar. I'm going to make a recommendation. I'm going to call up every single steering committee member after this conversation over the next couple of days. I'm going to hear from them what they think we should do. I'll record that feedback and I'll send it out to everybody. What we heard from the feedback with regards to the provisional governance recommendation and the conversations that we had was that there were only 6 conversations that we should change these boundaries. 3 of those were all within the same parish. And so I think while the discussion about overlapping authorities and being able to navigate that is valid, I think also it's been made very clear by the people of the steering committee that having these regional boundaries are what they would like to move forward with. I also understand that that is a point of contention for Amite River Basin Commission with regards to how the structure works and operates with ARBC. We would like to work with ARBC, and I think what we've experienced in the conversations that we've had recently, it's been challenging to figure out how we work together because we're so focused on how these boundaries work. So my question is, how does Amite River Basin Commission work with the structure as it exists? Because people are asking to keep these boundaries the same. And it's the steering committee that makes these decisions. We got to respect that. So I can call up every single steering committee member. Let me know if you think that's appropriate. Get their feedback and we can move forward.
Rachel, so we have a quorum. We had a quorum when we started. It seems like we have a quorum for the vote. Should I have called for an official vote with a motion, asking for a motion, or is it handled correctly? It was a consensus exercise as I see the slide. So if a formal vote's needed, let me know. If not, then I think based on the amount of people that have voted, if you want to call people who weren't here, I mean, that's fine, but I'd say that's up to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ross. We're going to actually package that in the final recommendation. So that's when we'll make the vote. But we do have one item that we got to vote on, which in particular, so we were reviewing the bylaws and we realized that the current bylaws text says that we are going to dissolve in spring or summer of 21, unless extended by OCD or the steering committee upon determination of an appropriate long-term watershed coalition framework. As we know, we're not there yet. And so really what we're thinking is that that transition will take place winter 21-22. And then, we really need to think about having the appropriate documents in place so that folks can transition into that. And then operating not to the full extent, obviously, prior to any type of legislation. And so the proposed update is to be able to dissolve upon the setup of an appropriate long-term coalition framework. So I kind of wanted to get some feedback on that and then see if we could get a motion to be able to change that in the bylaws.
Well, I'll call for a motion and then discussion, if any. So do I have a motion to update the bylaws to extend the time to the winter of 21?
I make a motion.
22? Bridget, was that you?
Yes.
Can I get a second?
This is Major.
All right, second by Major. Any discussion concerning the extension until winter 21-22? All right, anybody opposed to the change? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank y'all.
Thanks, all, for facilitating that. And then really the last, I guess piece of the sandwich here, this is our, I don't know, some type of condiment, if you like mustard, mayonnaise at the bottom of the sandwich before we get to the bread to close this out, is we did have a position that was open for Chuck Berger with DEQ. We know that he's fulfilling a larger role at the state level. And so we had to, with sadness, be able to have him move on to be able to support that work at the state. And so we wanted to think a little bit about who could fill that spot. And so we looked at the bylaws again. How this has worked and how it's in the bylaws is essentially as a recommendation by CRPC. That has to be approved by OCD based on the given guidelines. So there's like a rubric. I don't know if y'all remember that, but being able to fill gaps in occupational and demographic diversity based on the guidelines that were given. And then I think for us internally, we were also thinking about somebody who's already been involved in regularly attended meetings, who has wisdom, experience, is willing to contribute, and also represents voices that maybe aren't yet at the table. And so we spent some time thinking about this really since Chuck's departure. And so we have decided to be able to bring Ivy Matthew into this space. So Ivy Matthew is actually not with us today. She usually attends these meetings. And she has promised that she will be here at every meeting moving forward, but she is picking up trash on Elmer's Island because she also does work with BitNap. So she is an individual who's plugged in across many different levels. She is a resident technically of St. John the Baptist Parish. She lives in La Paz. She's a vice chair on their Coastal Advisory Committee. She's also secretary for Keep St. John Beautiful. She's also on the board for the Louisiana Recycling Coalition. She's also a part of the Louisiana Federal Credit Union Supervisory Committee. So it's an entity that's responsible for auditing and overseeing operating procedures. Also, she's on the St. John Healthy Community Committee. She partners with Amanda Moore, who's their, I think, director of outreach on National Wildlife Federation to shape and influence policies of Coastal Master Plan to be more people-centric. She also used to be a child advocate for CASA. She was also on the Lead the Coast Inaugural Committee. She graduated from that program, and she's also a current member of the Region 7 transition team. So she has a vast amount of experience that it overlaps with some of the experience that we have, and also brings some new lenses and voices to the table. And so we're really excited to be able to have Ivy. She also just shows up, and one of the first questions she asks is, how can I help? She's always wanting to be able to come into a space and learn from other people. And she has really been, since she retired, I think, maybe even more actively involved. She might work more hours now than she did when she worked, to be honest. So she's just an incredible advocate for Louisiana. And I know that she'll be an incredible advocate for this region. And I know that she also works a lot with folks in other regions too. So we want to say welcome to Ivy, not today because she's picking up trash at Elmer's Island again. But we're just really glad to have her incredible force as a part of this group as well. So we'll send out contact information to everybody, and we just want to give her a really big warm welcome. Okay, so we're going to go into the public comment section of this meeting. And we also, as per usual, we do have a board for you to be able to share some of your feedback as well. So if you're maybe not as comfortable speaking up, or if you want to add some feedback about how the meeting went afterwards, feel free to use this specific board as a way to do that. You can, of course, also email me. Just make sure that the subject line says Region 7 Steering Committee meeting so that I can know that it's a public comment specifically. But at this point in time, we'll open it up for public comment. Okay, well, not hearing any from the group. So Ross, Bridget, do we think we're ready?
Yep.
Perfect. And again, just know that you can email me. I know a lot of folks also have my phone number. If you don't have my phone number, it's in my email signature. So just feel free to also reach out to me that way. Did want to just bring a couple of items to people's attention before we close out. There is a Council on Watershed Management meeting tomorrow. So it's a special meeting, May 27th at 9 a.m. We're into Thursday. Oh my gosh. See, look at me being hopeful. Thank you. One day closer to the weekend. It's at 9 a.m. They're going to have conversations about round 1 project selection. So I know folks have been very, we'll say, patiently and enthusiastically waiting to hear back on that process. So just know that there's going to be some announcements on Thursday. I
guess that might solve if anybody else has competition with St. Tammany based on the projects that are selected. It might be a moot point.
Well, I mean, in the state projects and programs that were selected, you know, I know there were some areas that benefited from a lot more funds than a lot of other places. So.
All right. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So if you go to watershed.la.gov, and Evelyn, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but you should be able to go, and I'll just actually show y'all now. So you go to watershed.la.gov, and you go to get involved, and you click on a calendar. Usually they put all the events here, so you should be able to register. So right here for the Council on Watershed Management, I'm going to put this directly into the chat pod. you can register for that meeting. I also understand that they're doing it in person. So if you'd like to be there in person, that's a possibility, but they're also going to have a virtual option from my understanding. So also happy 1-year anniversary. I think I said that at the beginning, but I just wanted to say it again. It's been a really long year, but there's been a lot of growth. And I think that we've really transitioned from talking a lot about challenges to thinking strategically about solutions. And I think we're also building a community along the way. So I think we hold each other accountable. And I think that we also call each other now. A lot of you I didn't know before this process. And some of you I talked to on a multiple times a week. So it's just really been a pleasure. And I just wanted us to be able to celebrate that. Maybe we can have a little bit more space dedicated to this, or kind of like a little bit of social time after our next in-person meeting, which we're scheduling for next month. So upcoming meetings, June 29th from 1 to 3:30. Again, Bridget's going to be working with you to see if we can get that in person. Have a hybrid option for folks who want to attend virtually. And then we need to schedule beyond June. So just be on the lookout for a doodle poll from me. And I think those are really it, besides just thank yous, and then the adoption of our meeting minutes, and then adjourning. Ross, Bridget, is there anything else I'm forgetting?
No, I just want to thank, everybody again for attending, the regional steering committee members and the public, and had a good, robust discussion and debate today, which is great. I appreciate it, and just helps the process move forward in a better way. So if I can get a motion for the meeting minutes to adopt.
Major Colvin, I so move.
Thank you, sir.
Is there a second?
Thank you, sir. Earl with the second. Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Bridget, anything before I call for adjourn? Okay, Rachel, Evelyn, anybody? All right, last call. So can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I do that. I move.
All right, Major, I got you on the motion. Who had the second?
Earl.
Earl with the second. All right, sounds good. And again, just want to thank everybody from OCD, CRPC, LSU. They're, like Rachel says, too many to name. Tremendous amount of work, and they do a great job. So I just want to say thank you to them before we leave today, and we'll see everybody in June. Have a good Memorial Day weekend, and let's keep the rain away.
Thanks, y'all. Enjoy the
Yeah, be
weather.
safe out there.
Thanks,
Be
guys.
safe. Hydrate. Put on sunscreen. Bye, y'all.
All right.